Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Okay. Hello there. Good morning. Beautiful Monday morning in Pittsburgh, PA. Is this our last Monday in August? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jeez. Well, I hope it's a good one for you. Busy day for a lot of people, a lot of back-to-school stuff. Jess and I were just talking about how exciting that used to be when you were going back to school. I think a lot of kids feel that way, but a lot also feel dread. It depends. It depends. God, what year was it? I was probably on my way back into 5th or 6th grade. Two of my friends, Heidi and Pat, we had decided that, you know, how what you wore the first day, if you were a girl, was like big. It was big, right? And having like the new shoes or the this or the that, it was huge. I mean, you could spend half your summer wondering and worrying about it. And we had a brilliant idea. We decided we were going to make our dresses. And we were going to all wear the same dress. And so we did. As I remember this dress, it was the most god-awful looking thing you can imagine. It was some silly print, and it had rick-rack. You know what rick-rack is? Do you know what rick-rack is, Jess? It's like this little thing you stick on that's got a, you know, that's, it's a design. You know, it has a little bzz, 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 wavy thing, I think. And we had it around the neck, and we had rick-rack around the hem. We were hot. Boy, did we think we were cool. The three of us getting off the bus all in the same dress. That was cool. Oh, well, that's a long time ago. The one thing I can't help but notice is the East End is a lot more crowded. Oh, gosh. Boy, when all those students come back, and if you live in that area where all the most of the universities and colleges are, gee whiz! All of a sudden, it's not easy to park. You're waiting in line. There's a lot of young people around. It's nice. It's nice, I think, depending on which side of the bed you got up on. Okay. Excuse me. I was engaging in magical thinking on the bus coming in. I was sitting on a very crowded bus. There were people standing, and I had a pretty good view down one line, so I could see different groups, different people. And for once, I didn't have my nose in something that I was reading or in my phone, so I did what I used to do back in the day, which was look at my fellow passengers, wonder about them. The part that always gets me when you're stuck with a bunch of strangers in tight quarters is I'm always overwhelmed by the immensity of the world, by the fact that I'm in this place and there's all these people and they live in the same city I do and they take the same bus I do, but I don't know them and I don't know their lives. And you can just look at one and you wonder, what's happening with him? Where's he go? I can literally scare myself on a bus doing this because the enormity of the world, and how even in your this little teeny part of it, how you're a stranger and you're mostly just an observer. And I was seated next to a young black man who did something that I appreciated. I did not acknowledge it. I suspected he wouldn't have wanted me to. When I got on the bus, he had been sitting so that he was on the aisle seat. And there was a seat then at the window. People were already standing. There are certain times when people they shy away from open seats for a number of reasons, usually because they look too tight and you're embarrassed about trying to plant your behind in it and instead, forcing other people, strangers again, to literally share, to have your flesh pressed against theirs. And so people there's always these seats that aren't taken, even though I see skinny people not take them. And I think, what's wrong with you? You could slide in there and you wouldn't have to engage in any, excuse me, you could just sit. But this kid was essentially blocking one seat. You would have had to say to him, excuse me, could I sit there? And he looked unhappy. And his legs were sort of sprawled. And he clearly knew people would like a seat, but he wasn't moving. And my reaction to that often is, sort of anger. And I often think to myself, just say, excuse me, and he'll move. But I didn't feel like it today, so I stood there. Strangely, all of a sudden, he moves over. So something clicked in his head where he said he did the right thing. He said to himself, okay, there are people standing, I should move over. So he moved over and I plopped down next to him. But I was probably projecting, but his body language, everything, I just sensed such turmoil and unhappiness in this young guy. And I sat there trying so hard to I thought, maybe if I sent loving thoughts his way, it would help him. And I sat there thinking, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. Whatever. And I started to okay, I'm nuts. Okay, I'm nuts. I should shut up. He broke my heart. You get on a bus full of people, and if you bother to think about them as individuals, it makes you, I don't know, it often makes me sad because I think a lot of them are sad. You wonder where they're going. You wonder where they came from. You wonder if it's a warm place or if it's a hellish place. So anyway, taking the bus downtown can be so overwhelming. that when you get off, you're lucky. I mean, I got off one stop early so I could just walk for a while and clear my head. Because when you do that magical thinking stuff, actually, I think I was trying to save this guy with my thoughts. Oh, Jesus God. Somebody round me up and put me away. Don't you ever think that? Where is everybody coming from? Where are they all going? What individual tragedies and triumphs are standing here with me at the bus stop? The world is overwhelming. Which brings me to Schopenhauer. You name another talk show where Schopenhauer came up today, huh? I've never taken a philosophy course. Jess, did you ever take a philosophy course? You did? Mm-hmm. Good for you. So you had to read philosophy? Jeez. Never read a one. So Schopenhauer, I know he was a philosopher, and I read something about him today. First of all, that which he loved most in the world was a poodle. Somehow Schopenhauer and a poodle doesn't seem right, but there it is. Later middle age, he moved to Frankfurt with his beloved poodle. And he sat in his flat and tried to think, because that's what philosophers do. He thought and thought and thought. He had many a weighty thought, as opposed to me, who sits on buses and has these bizarro thoughts. He thought, and he was practically driven mad by the noise outside in the street. The sound of human commerce, the sound of horses' hooves, the sound of voices, just the hustle and bustle of an urban center. And he couldn't think. And that's his job. He couldn't think. There was such distraction, such noise. And so, philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer began to consider noise the arch enemy of serious thought. And I don't know anything else about him, but I concur and always have. Anyone who's listened to me for any length of time knows that I love silence. I love it. Silence has a kind of enormity about it, too. But I find it comforting. Schopenhauer believed that a great mind can have great thoughts only if it is able to marshal all its powers and focus like a laser. Well, he didn't know about lasers. Like a laser beam on whatever the thought was. He thought just as an army is useless if its soldiers and brigades are scattered willy-nilly, helter-skelter, heaven knows where, all over the place, it is ineffective. So is the mind. The mind, our own cerebral army, must be focused. And without it, we cannot really think, at least as well. Now, I firmly believe this, and I believe in this crazy, clamorous, cluttered environment we all live in, with constant noise and constant distraction that it has absolutely had an effect, negative, on our ability to focus, hence concentrate, hence think clearly, and with all the powers of our brain. And somehow I escaped my sister's 3 years younger than me. She grew up watching TV. I did not. We didn't get a TV till quite late, well into the 50s. And she grew up lying on her stomach in the living room doing her homework with the television on. I could no more do my homework with the television on because it's I can't even do my homework or read with music on. Because if there's music playing, I want to listen to it. The idea of background music is absurd to me. It's just noise at that point, if I want to read. So I am really, Schopenhauer didn't know how good he had it. If he were to come back today with all of this constant, not just oral cacophony, but also the visual cacophony, the everything, everywhere, I am convinced that he would lose his brilliant mind. So anyway, it turns out he's right. Scientifically, he's right. We've done a million studies now. The studies that had to be done about, whether texting while driving or listening to, or being on the phone, if this distracts. Yes, of course it distracts. Come on. But findings have shown that noise not only distracts, but it harms us. Noise, whether we think we're bothered by it or not, our bodies are. Our bodies are. You think you're filtering all the weed whackers and blowers out? No, you can't really. And your brain is responding to them. And guess how it responds? It responds by putting out stress hormones. It responds by your blood pressure elevating. Studies have shown that even if, let's say, somebody who lives near an airport, and so a jet takes off while they're sleeping all the time, that's a big noise. But they learn to sleep through it because, after all, they just have to. Studies show that even if you're able to sleep through the noise, your body is still being assaulted by it. Increased blood pressure, vasoconstriction, stress hormones, and that all that stays with you well into your day. So get this. The World Health Organization conservatively estimates that Western Europeans lose more than 1 million healthy years of life annually as a consequence of noise-related disease. Among environmental hazards, only air pollution causes more damage than noise. But we think we've adapted to it, and we don't acknowledge it. In one opinion, Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, pointed out this about our founding fathers. Because we all acknowledge that they were a pretty smart crowd, right? They were a good group. They were capable of thought and focus. And Justice Frankfurter said this, quote, "The men whose labors brought forth the Constitution of the United States had the street outside Independence Hall covered with earth so that their deliberations might not be disturbed by passing traffic." So I'm assuming those streets outside Independence Hall were cobblestone streets. Our founding fathers essentially put a blanket over them so that the clack, clack, clack of the horses' hooves would not distract them from creating the United States of America. Jeez! And here's something else Frankfurter said. Our democracy presupposes the deliberative process as a condition of thought and of responsible choice by the electorate. He's saying that, okay, the founding fathers did that. We need to put blankets on our streets too so that we think clearly and seriously before we perform our responsibilities as voters and citizens. Anyway, I just loved it. Schopenhauer is my new favorite philosopher who I haven't read. And got all this from a piece in Sunday's New York Times. And it has a great last line. I'll give you the last two. Most people who are seeking more serenity from the acoustical environment are not asking for the silence of the tomb. We just believe we should be able to hear ourselves think. Hear that silence. We're incapable of silence now. Even as I said the silence, I hear this rushing from all the headset. We never, ever really have quiet anymore. I recommend it. And isn't that ironic since my job is to yam and yammer and blah, blah, blah. So much acoustical noise. We'll take a break.
Stick around for more with Lynn Cullen live after this.
Go to bergbargains.com for great deals on gift cards from your favorite local restaurants, bars, museums, attractions, and shows. This week, 50% off tickets to the Pittsburgh Irish Festival. Supplies are limited. bergbargains.com, Pittsburgh's best bargains. bergbargains.com.
Come to Little's for all of your back-to-school needs. Little's has everything for all ages to stay in style for this upcoming school season. Check out the large selection from Doc Marten, Steve Madden, UGG, Clark's, Lely Kelly, New Balance, and much, much more. Don't forget to come visit this season's colorful handbag selection as well. Little Shoes, Pittsburgh's largest family shoe store, 5850 Forbes Avenue in Squirrel Hill.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn@pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
Melanie writes, I had the exact opposite bus adventure today from mine. She says, I saw a black mother with her young boy, maybe 8 or 9, who was obviously starting school today. He had a shirt and tie on and his pirate's hat. Aww. And they were so engaged in conversation. It was so sweet. And I kept thinking, I hope he survives the perils of being a young black man in this world. Oh, Melanie. Yeah, you see, you think like I do. P.S., she says on the silent subject, read the book Quiet. It speaks to so many of the issues that you talk about, how our culture worships extroverts and doesn't value the introverted mind. Ray writes, before you fall in love with Schopenhauer. Oh, Ray, ignorance is bliss. He was an ass, says Ray. Well, he might have been an ass, but I think he was right about noise. Ray sends me some Schopenhauer to read. This is from something called On Women. Oh, but come on, given his time. This is like 1840 or something, right? Anyway, here's what he says. One need only look at a woman's shape to discover that she is not intended for either too much mental or too much physical work. Ha! Excuse me. She pays the debt of life not by what she does, but by what she suffers, by the pains of childbearing, care for the child, and by subjection to man, to whom she should be a patient and cheerful companion. Jesus H. Women as essentially bovine. Women as dogs. Women as dedicated servers of their husbands. Schopenhauer again, the greatest sorrows and joys or great exhibition of strength are not assigned to her. Her life should flow more quietly, more gently, and less obtrusively than a man's, without her being essentially happier or unhappier. He gave women nothing. No thought. No, God. Well, now, listen, I grew up with this thought about, that's how I grew up. When I grew up, a little kid, that was still the sense of women, that I was growing up as a girl child to essentially serve a man, to not be obtrusive, to have very limited kinds of possibilities, right? So this isn't so old-fashioned. I mean, people were subscribing to this well a century plus afterwards, and half the world still does. He goes on, women are directly adapted to act as the nurses and educators for our early childhood for the simple reason that they themselves are childish, foolish, and short-sighted. In a word, are big children all their lives. Ooh! Consider how a young girl will toy day after day with a child, dance with it and sing with it, and then consider what a man with the very best intentions in the world could do in her place. What? Oh, God. As Schopenhauer, too bad he didn't live to see that, in fact, if anyone is a child in most adult relationships, it's invariably the man. Yeah. Who is cared for by the woman, because women are constantly being thought of as the tenders to the nurses, the feeders, the everything, the be-all and end-all, that it is men who are infantilized by the power of women. And it is only because women are so strong physically and mentally that they have tolerated for millennia being thought of as the weaker sex, because men are the weaker sex. And women take on that role because men can't handle the truth. All right, Ray says, I think Schopenhauer's noise was really from the hollowness of his misogynistic head. So look here. At what point do we give somewhat of a pass to even great thinkers who are living in a time when no great thinker has yet said, women, I think, are the equal of man intellectually. I mean, if you grow up in an age in which certain things are held to be true and you believe it, even going back to our founding fathers, right? I mean, they were so many of them were slaveholders. Does that make them evil? Or does that make them complex men living in their time? Does it make them less admirable? These are questions which, anyone from time to time wrestles with, if they can find a quiet moment to contemplate such a topic, right? All right, I hate Schopenhauer. You did your duty. And one more thing from Ray. Well, I can't see it because it's not coming up. It was apparently a visual. And PJ has sent me a picture of Schopenhauer, who now I can't stomach. Oh, Jesus. He looks like he's thinking. He looks like he's engaged in thought. Okay, well, thank you all very much. See, I never took philosophy, and I don't think I would have been good at it. So Turner Classic Movies was showing a lot of Clark Gable yesterday. And Mutiny on the Bounty came on, which I've seen a million times. And that was interesting because I had just earlier that day read the obituary of one, get this, Tom Christian. Now, as you know, the role that I was going to say Brando, yeah. Brando played it. And, Jesus, why did I just blank on his name? Clark Gable played it. The noxious Mel Gibson played it. A lot of people have played it, but the role is Fletcher Christian, the officer who mutinied against Captain Bligh. Now, this was a true event, as I'm sure you know. And Tom Christian died 2 weeks ago, 77 years old. He was the great-great-great-grandson of Fletcher Christian, the leader of the mutiny, who founded Pitcairn Island. Tom Christian lived his life on Pitcairn Island, descended from Fletcher Christian, and surrounded also by other people descended from that same group of sailors and the Tahitian women they took as wives. The population of Pitcairn Island right now, with the passing of Tom Christian, is 51. There are only 51 people on that island now. Do you know how you get there? This is bizarre. I mean, obviously, they knew they'd be hunted down. So they found such an out-of-the-way little uninhabited piece of... It is no more than 2 square miles. That island in the enormity is a big word today, in the enormity of the Pacific Ocean, a rock, 2 square miles, is where Fletcher Christian and his cohorts scuttled the Bounty and set it on fire to cover themselves and where it still lies, in the waters off that rock. Pitcairn Island is equidistant between Peru and New Zealand, and there's about 3,000 miles each way. To get there, say you wanted to go today, well, it's hard. You can't fly in. There's no airstrip. You would have to fly to Tahiti, which is quite a flight, and then wait until the once-a-week plane from Tahiti to Mangariva Island. And once you get that once-a-week plane to Mangariva Island, you then have to get on a boat and sail to Pitcairn, and that takes 2 to 3 days. So they found a good hiding place, if you think about it. So this Tom Christian who died, he ran the radio on the island. So he's the one who kept in touch with the outside world. He was also a very prolific ham radio operator. There are no automobiles on Pitcairn. There's now 14 hours of electricity a day if they're likely. If they're likely, what am I saying? Geez. But here's the neatest thing in this obit that I have to tell you. So Tom Pitcairn, in 2005, made his way to London, where he was giving a speech of some sort. And he had the joy, according to the obit, of catching up with an Englishman that he had met more than 30 years earlier when he was a young man. He had met him in 1971 when a cargo ship put in to Pitcairn, because that's the only way they had anything there. A cargo ship came 4 times a year. So the cargo ship puts into Pitcairn, and Tom Christian met this Englishman whose name was, are you ahead of me on this? His name was Maurice Bligh, and he was the great-great-great-grandson of Captain William Bligh. And they became fast friends. So is that not mind-blowing? 200 plus years later, after Fletcher Christian had put Captain Bligh into the boat and taken off with the mutineers and with the bounty, here were their great-great-great-grandsons meeting and really liking each other. I love it! Anyway, that's the obit of the day. And we got more. Ray says, this Schopenhauer didn't just ignorantly exhibit the prejudices of the time. He spent untold, educated, introspective hours thinking about the status of women. And after all this philosophic research, he became a proponent of that prejudice. A man of his so-called intelligence has a greater obligation to see the light. Your forgiveness astounds me. Well, but so many, okay, all right. You're saying if he was to be known as a great mind, he should have been able to make that big leap over the, I don't know. I think it's easy for us living where we live in our day and age with what's been poured into our heads to have some disdain for people whose experience, and I think your wisdom comes often from experience, don't you? I don't know, because I don't pretend to be wise. Huh. Well, I don't know. Okay, so maybe I'm too quick to forgive. Sometimes I think I'm very, very unwilling to forgive. Your talk about quiet, writes Joseph, brought this immediately to my mind. Here's an excerpt from an episode of I Love Lucy that took place in their new Connecticut home on the first night spent after moving in. Lucy's unable to fall asleep. She says, "I never heard so much quiet. If you ask me, it's a little too quiet." Ricky says, "I know what you mean." Lucy says, "I wish a taxi would go by or something." Ricky says, "Or a fire engine." Lucy, "Or one of those lovely rattling garbage trucks." Lucy says, "This quiet is so loud I can't sleep." Lucy says, "Maybe I could sleep better if you took up snoring," she says to Ricky. And Ricky says, "Well, how can I take up snoring if I can't fall asleep?" There's no better writing than that on sitcoms today. And you know what? I absolutely had the same when I lived in New York. I slept very well with all the honking and all that. I thought I did, but you see, and the sirens and the rattling garbage trucks. But what this science tells us is, in fact, my body was being assaulted by that noise, whether I had learned to tune it out or not. But when I would go home to visit my parents in Green Bay and find myself in my childhood bed trying to sleep, and all I could hear were crickets, I couldn't sleep. The quiet was deafening. The quiet was so loud, as Lucy says, that I couldn't sleep. And David writes about noise. I agree with you 100% about trying to do one thing while listening to something else. There are times when I'm sitting here listening to you and trying to type an email, like right now, and I have to turn you off because I can't do two things at the same time. You're showing your age. Yeah. But then I turn you back on. Gotta have my Lynn fix. Thank you, Dave. Thank you. And thank you for the emails. Thank you very much. So, okay, we better take another. I haven't started the show yet. Okay, we'll take a break, and when we come back, maybe we'll have a show.
Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com or call Lynn at 412-316-3381. Lynn Cullen Live will return in a moment.
This week's Pittsburgh City Paper is available now. Pick up one today for the annual Steeler issue. Plus, City Paper's special auto guide pullout with all the hot dealers to buy your next car from. Pittsburgh City Paper, available at over 1,700 locations throughout Western Pennsylvania and on the web at pghcitypaper.com and on your smartphone with GPS-enabled listings at citypapermobile.com.
Babies come with lots of decisions.
Cloth or disposable? Crib or bassinet?
So when it comes to protection, go with the safest, most effective choice, vaccination. Get all the recommended vaccines for your baby by age 2 to protect your child against 14 serious childhood diseases. For more reasons to vaccinate, talk to your child's doctor. Go to cdc.gov/vaccines or call 800-CDC-INFO. A message from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Les Ludwig, your independent, self-financed, clean candidate for mayor of Pittsburgh. You've heard the saying, same old. If we don't change what we're doing, we can only expect the same results. Let's look at what the Democratic Party leadership of your lifetime is asking you to do on Election Day. They want you to forget that they and Ravenstall have not lived up to minority contracts and the jobs involved in it. If government promises work and jobs and wants to leave it for the next candidate, will it ever get done? How can we trust Peduto and especially the leadership when they continue to act this way? Are they hiding something worse than Harper's misdeeds? Vote November 5th and remember, same old. Embrace change and work willingly with it. Think outside the party's box. Make Les Ludwig your mayor and join his march to clean government and keeping promises.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
Okay, PJ writes in regard to my looking for a quiet place to think. He says, Pitcairn Island. I think you found the place for you for silence. 2 square miles and just 51 people on it. Yeah, that would be it. The intermarriage that goes on that island must be really... I mean, they say that everybody's sort of marrying cousins, and I mean, how... Yeah. It's a wonder Tom Christian was able to give a speech. I mean, really. And for some reason, I think Pitcairn is actually part of the British Empire, so... Even though they mutinied, I think Pitcairn Islanders are... But I don't know where I'm getting that. That might be just off the top of my head. So, and Jess had a good question. She said, do you think the Pitcairn here is named after Pitcairn Island? And I don't think so. There was a Pitcairn... Jess, you could look it up. Yeah. But I think there was a guy... A founding father of... Robert Pitcairn, yeah.
Official of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Okay, he was an official of the Pennsylvania Railroad, right. Well, hoop-de-doo. Okay, so he got a town named after him. So I'll tell you, one of the things that jingles and jangles in our heads and can interrupt our thoughts, the telephone, right? But have you seen that a number of people in Italy have found their phone ringing, their landline? So these are generally older people or somebody who's got a landline in their house, since most Europeans just have their cells now. And you pick up the phone. What do they say when they pick up the phone in Italy? Ciao? Do they say that? Or allo? I don't know what they say. But on the other end, someone says, it's the Pope. And it is. He's been calling people willy-nilly. Well, not willy-nilly. People who have maybe sent him a letter. One woman, he sent him a book, and he picked up the phone and called her and had a long conversation with her. It's the Pope, is what he says when they say, hello, it's the Pope. And can you imagine? I remember there's that funny story about, and I'm sure there's many stories that are like this, when Sophie was the mayor, she's sitting in her mayoral office one day, and her phone rings, and she picks it up. Hello, she says, and the voice on the other end says, hi, it's Bill Clinton, Sophie. And she said, yeah, sure, and I'm the Queen of Sheba, and hung up. He called back. Sophie, it really is. This is Bill Clinton. Ow, it is? Well, I don't know if she hung up on him again, but yeah, he loved it. And so I'm sure a few people maybe have hung up on the Pope. But, you know, there's something, you tell me, you couldn't, if you were a PR guy trying to get the new Pope to be really liked, you couldn't come up with stuff that was any better than what this guy seems to just do on his own. Now, it could be because he's got a smart PR-ish mind, or it could be he really is that sort of regular guy wanting to keep in touch, wouldn't mind talking to a normal person. And I suspect that's what it is. That's what I want to believe. I mean, he's the one who, right after he got to be Pope, he called the newspaper stand in Buenos Aires, where he used to get his newspapers. He personally called the newsstand and said, I'm sorry, but I have to cancel my my subscription. because I'm not living there anymore. And who'd you say this is? It's the Pope! He called his shoemaker to tell him, don't you dare make me any of those stupid red shoes. I just want to keep going with my regular black ones with the orthotics. You gotta love it. Anyway, some Italian newspaper had tips on their front page. If the Pope calls, don't freak. He probably just wants to have a normal conversation. So just don't worry about boring him. If he wants to be bored, he'll call a cardinal in. Or he can talk to some head of state somewhere. He probably just want to talk about what regular people talk about. Something awful nice about that. So are you sick already, and have you heard about the Beloit College list this year already? The Post-Gazette had it Sunday. This is that marvelous idea that I think is now, 30-some years old, that somebody at Beloit College, which is in Beloit, Wisconsin, it's a great little school. I considered it, actually, when I was in high school, because I knew what a great little school it was, but I wanted bigger. They, one of the, I think he was a public affairs director or something, got the idea that to help connect the professors there and anybody else who's going to be dealing with the incoming freshmen, it would help to remind them the cultural and environment in which these young people grew up. And, it would help all. I find this list fascinating every year because it shows us how the realities that framed our youth and in many respects framed our perceptions, that reality isn't really there anymore. It's been replaced by an entirely different reality in which the young people of today are growing. And so, these generational schisms are understandable when you realize the different worlds. So the Beloit College mindset list every year just tries to remind us, hey, these freshmen that are coming in now, this is their mindset. If you say, what does GM mean to them? What does GM mean to you? General Motors, says Jess, and she's youngin'. You ask incoming freshmen, GM, what is it? The odds are you'll get as many kids saying genetically modified.
Isn't GMO?
I don't know. No. I don't know. Genetically modified means food that is genetically... GM means... But I mean, it's like... Or somebody like Eminem or LL Cool J. Kids who are starting college today would not be surprised to see Eminem at Parents' Weekend. Jess doesn't buy it. Yes.
Rapper?
Yes. No, I'm saying that's how old he is to them. He's as old as their parents, some of them. Eminem. Yeah.
That old?
These are kids that have never heard of something as stupid as a map that once you opened it, you could never fold it back up again. They've never had to ask for directions. They just give them an address. They have GPS, right? They're embarrassed by the CD player in their parents' car. They have never eaten in a restaurant where someone's smoking. They have never gone to a concert that was smoke-filled. Their favorite films, almost all, have been largely, if not totally, computer generated. Really. And speaking of Eminem and LL Cool J, I did not watch what Jess apparently watched last night because I see her tweets. And that was the VMA Video Music Awards. And I did not see it, and I did not see what everybody's talking about, but I did see some still photos of what everybody's talking about. And it's pretty hard to shock anybody anymore, especially in that venue. Video, music awards, they're known for their envelope pushing or tastelessness. And Miley Cyrus, apparently, did a dance or two that freaked people out. Freaked that crowd out. The big picture is of Will Smith and his family who were in the audience. And somebody took a picture of them as they watched Miley Cyrus on stage. And you would think they were from Branson, Missouri. I'm not. Will Smith and his family. They're like. So how bad would it be? I mean, we're used to simulated sex and all that kind of stuff, but this was so apparently despicably over the top. And then what? She left and caused a stir by leaving the awards.
She didn't win anything.
She didn't win. So she took her big masturbatory finger and left. You'll have to look at the pictures. Jesus. This is culture. This is popular culture. And her father, the Billy Ray Cyrus, tweeted his approval of his daughter's lovely performance. Any father seeing a daughter do what she did apparently last night, who approves, be out of their mind. But they love this stuff, right? That's why we're talking about it today. I didn't even see it. Little Miley Cyrus, another Disney star gone bad. What is it with those little Disney star girls that they turn into like sluttos?
Not all of them.
Not all of them. Well, I'm thinking of a few. Maybe they've come back. I mean, they just get a little Christina. Christina, our own little Christina, Brittany. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm. And then there's the guys that seem to do okay, which is like Justin Timberlake, who I believe that Jess has a serious crush on. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I've done pretty well, right? I didn't do serious stuff today, even though there's talk that we might be at war with Syria. Or we're just going to do a military action of some sort and then go home. I don't know. What is it we're going to do? Here's the question. This is one of those things. Go to a quiet place like a bunker and contemplate this. Because it is a moral question. And I can't figure out the answer. I'm not consistent with my response, which leads me to believe that I have some hypocrite in me. After more than 2 years of the fighting in Syria and a death toll exceeding, they say, 100,000 people, and now this gas attack, some people believe that President Obama has a moral imperative to step in. Well, that's an issue. Do we, as the United States of America, have a moral imperative to intervene? Even though it's a no-win situation for us. No matter which side in this wins, we lose. Believe me, there's nothing for us over there but trouble. But do we have a moral imperative? Do we? By virtue of our might, by virtue of our status, by pretending to be the leader of the free world, do we then have a moral imperative? That's a question that's huge. It's back in the enormity kind of enormity, kind of? What am I trying to say? It's huge, and I don't pretend. I mean, I don't want us to get involved in there at all. I do not want us to. And yet there are places where, like, you know, when Hitler was starting to kill everybody, where I thought, well, why did the world just sit back? Why did they allow this to happen? And we've asked that in other situations of genocide or slaughter. If you're just unlucky enough to be born a Syrian, that's sorry, but you live in this screwed up country and we can't fix everything. Is that a defensible position? On the other hand, any military action we take, is that going to fix it? No. So what are we supposed to do? What's the moral imperative there? You'll have to think about it, and if anybody comes up with an answer, you tell me, because I don't know. I'm as conflicted as a person can be. We're still trying to get out from under these. If you look at the Middle East, or you look at the Arab world in particular, and throw in Iran, which is Persia, what the hell are we supposed to do? In Egypt now. That's our responsibility? No one can figure out these messes. Nobody. And you've got these horrific, evil characters with lots of military might of their own, much of it, in the case of Egypt, supplied by us, with which they then turn around and gun down peaceful protesters. Okay, what's the moral imperative of our situation there? It sure starts seeming like the way to go is to turn our back, wash our hands, turn our back, and say, I mean, we can't fix it. We don't condone it. But what the hell are we supposed to do? Remember the Arab Spring? I'm sure I've shared this with you before, but when it started happening country after country after country, I remember saying in my brother's earshot that, wow, Syria's next. And he said, Syria, there's not going to be any spring in Syria. He said, because Assad will kill every last Syrian before he'll give up power. And so far, my brother looks like he was prophetic about that, because I think that's true. And he was going on the fact that Bashir, Assad's father, had destroyed his own people, mowed down an entire town when he was displeased. What are we supposed to do? I'm just asking. Okay, I leave with that very heavy thought. And I hope you go forth and enjoy this last Monday in August. Have a good, quiet day.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.